How you guys doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege. Officially through Week 12 in the NFL, another round of great games culminated all yesterday with the Harbaugh brothers facing off against each other. John Harbaugh came out on top. The Ravens won 30-23 on Monday Night Football. We're going to get into everything, all the reactions. Are the Chargers for real or not? We're going to answer those questions as we go along. Then, talking about Week 12, we still have to get to the Titans' upset win over the Houston Texans. A lot to take from that game, mostly from the Texans, so we're going to get into all of that. And another divisional game, just as important, with the Seahawks hosting the Arizona Cardinals and defeating them 16-6. A big game with big implications as well that we're going to go over and analyze on today's show, along with some other things down the line as well. So make sure to stick around for all of that. But before we do get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you have any questions or comments or just anything you'd like to share during the show, please don't hesitate to do so. Your input is always a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to go about that, just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $ at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat. In this way, it guarantees that your message gets on the air. I'm able to see it, I'll read it out loud, and we can take the conversation from there. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and as exciting as possible. Again, get involved with the show, use the new Super Chat feature, click the $ and get involved. But with that now out of the way, we can start talking about what we saw yesterday on Monday Night Football. A very interesting game, just more so from the result and really how we got there, because the whole narrative around this game yesterday was the Harbaugh brothers facing off against each other. It was the third time they've played against each other, or coached against each other, I should say, and John Harbaugh is now 3-0 against his younger brother, Jim Harbaugh. And, the Ravens visited the Los Angeles Chargers yesterday, and they got the victory. 30-23 was the final score. And now Baltimore is able to go to 8-4 on the season so far, getting closer to the Pittsburgh Steelers for the AFC North title. While the Los Angeles Chargers, on the other hand, still have a game to go to catch up to the Baltimore Ravens, right? The Ravens have played 12 now, while the Chargers have played 11. They drop back to the 6th seed now after they lose, and they drop to 7-4. And Baltimore obviously takes over that 5th spot with the win over the Chargers. And Lamar Jackson also was a big part of this game, obviously, with his performance and just overall him, Derrick Henry, and how the offense really got back on track after only scoring 16 points against the Steelers. They get back to it and put up another 30-point game and make it look very easy, might I add. But Lamar Jackson, like I said, in particular, his dominance on Monday Night Football continued, because now, just on Monday Night Football, Lamar Jackson is 7-2, and he's 6-1 on the road as well. He has 124 passer rating on Monday Night Football, which is the best in NFL history, and he added to his tally of 22 touchdowns now with no interceptions thrown, again, on Monday Night Football. Very positive, obviously, for the Ravens, but for the Chargers, other than the negative scoreline, obviously, there was some bad news for them with J.K. Dobbins getting hurt early in the early going into halftime, right? He kind of went back early to kind of get his knee checked out, and he never came back into the game. He was going to try it out with a brace on, but it never really got to a spot where he was comfortable with it, so he never came back into the game, and that was a huge blow for the Chargers, obviously, without their lead back. So they had to rely on Justin Herbert a bit more maybe than they were planning to. That also just came with the flow of the game, right? With the points being ramped up as the game went along. You were most likely going to throw anyway. But with that being said, Justin Herbert finished with 218 yards. He was sacked 4 times in this game. He didn't throw a touchdown nor an interception. Not really much from the rushing game once once J.K. Dobbins went out. Gus Edwards came in as well, and he did score a touchdown, but he only had 11 rushing yards on 9 carries, so they didn't really get too much production from there. Also, Ravens' run defense is one of the best in the NFL, so once you lose your lead back, it was always going to be tough to kind of get back into the game through the running game. But in the passing game, not too, I guess, lopsided against the Ravens, right, where you get to become accustomed to seeing the Ravens maybe struggle a lot in that area. They held the leading receivers for the Chargers, Ladd McConkey, to only 83 receiving yards on 6 receptions. And then outside of him, Will Dissly had 4 receptions. Joshua Palmer had 3. Quentin Johnson had a rough game. He was targeted 5 times, and he dropped 3 passes over the course of the game. So he had a rough go at it. But even still, they were still able to put up 23 points against the Baltimore Ravens, where Lamar had 177 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Derrick Henry, monster game. It's weird when you see Derrick Henry. They always talk about the stat, or I always see people talking about the stat about how whenever he averages over 20 or like 22 carries or something like that in a game, the Ravens not only win, but he obviously has a big part to do in that. And this time was no different. He had 24 carries, 140 rushing yards, but it was Justice Hill and Lamar Jackson who scored the only 2 rushing touchdowns of the game. Mark Andrews and Rashad Bateman added 2 more touchdowns as well through the air. So it was a pretty good day overall. You had the passing game getting involved, also the running game for the Ravens as well getting going again. They were 4 for 4 they were 3 for 3 on 4th down, which was a big part in this game for the Baltimore Ravens. They still struggled a little bit with the penalties. They had 9 last week, and now they had 9 again. And even still, they were able to win. So, you'll take it when you can get it. But still, it is something that I do take notice of. In these games, you might be able to squeak by it, in the regular season. But you want to bring those penalties down to probably around like 5 or 6 at best. So regardless of that, how the game kind of broke down in its totality, the Chargers actually had a 10-0 lead in this game before Baltimore scored twice consecutively to go up 10-14. But the Chargers were able to save a field goal there towards the end of the first half, and the halftime scoreline was 13-14 in favor of the Ravens. And then after both teams exchanged the field goal, it was 16-17, and Baltimore really started to pick up the pace, right? They scored 2 more times after that, and in between those scores, the Chargers punted 1 time, so they weren't able to kind of interrupt the Ravens' offensive flow at that point in time. So just out of nowhere, while the Chargers stayed at 16, like I mentioned, the Ravens scored 2 more times after that, and they were able to go up 30-16 at this point in time. And it stayed like that for a while before the Chargers got 1 more touchdown there towards the end of the game. But Baltimore recovered the onside kick, and it was pretty much over from that point on, obviously. So a pretty dominant performance overall. The Ravens dominated them in terms of rushing, really controlling the pace of the game. Those 4th downs, like I mentioned, were huge for the Ravens, and I am interested to see if John Harbaugh is going to stay this aggressive with it. You have just as good of a situation as anybody would like, right, to try as many 4th downs as possible. You think of the Eagles right away with the tush push, or the Buffalo Bills with Josh Allen and just how massive he is, obviously, right? So those 2 guys stand out as the ideal situations, and I feel like they're always 2 of the most aggressive teams when it comes to 4th downs, and also the Lions, can't forget about them. But the Ravens, there was one moment in particular where they were back around their 16-yard line, and they still went for it. They still went for it. It was a big gamble, obviously, given the circumstances of the game and just how unprecedented that is, honestly. But still, John Harbaugh didn't blink, and he reaped the rewards of it. Right now, he looks like a genius, right? Because he was aggressive with it. They executed it perfectly, and now everyone's singing his praises. But you walk a fine line there, so I am interested to see how they're going to manage it going forward, if they're always going to do it. Does it have to do anything with Justin Tucker? I feel like that's a stretch, but I'm just kind of throwing things out there, right? Justin Tucker has missed a couple, so I don't know if they're feeling a little bit iffy about him now. I doubt it, but, again, it is a possibility. I don't see why not, and again, they have the personnel to do it, so being aggressive, made the difference overall in this game. They were able to keep drives alive and just demoralize the Chargers from that point on. But speaking on the Chargers here, just to close it out a little bit, does this mean like the Chargers are frauds or they're just not a good team, that they've played a cupcake schedule or anything like that? I mean, there's some aspect to that maybe holds some more legitimacy. Maybe their opponents aren't that tough. I could kind of see that, but still, I would still, considering everything about the Chargers and where they are right now and where everybody thought they would be, right, with a new head coach coming in, new players, new real foundation, and really idea around what they wanted to do, they're really miles ahead of where they should be. If anything, they probably, if I were to guess what people thought they were going to look like, maybe something like the Commanders, probably, something like that, where you have the quarterback, you're trying to implement this new form of playing, this new scheme, foundation, and everything like that. Probably people thought this was going to be like what the Commanders are showing right now, but, the Chargers are pretty much, I would say, a bit ahead of them. It feels like they're a lot more secure, and like everybody knows what their assignments are when it comes to, playing these games. And, they defeated the Bengals, which was the toughest game up until that point for them. And in this game, they had their opportunities, right? I think it still goes back to the fact that, Ladd McConkey is a great receiver. I think he's going to do amazing things, but you still need more other than that. Will Dissly's nice. I'm forgetting one of the receivers' names, but regardless of who, Joshua Palmer, that's who. Regardless of who's there right now, I still think they need one more, A+, A- kind of guy that you can depend upon. And I'm not saying that yesterday's loss was on Quentin Johnson, but, some of those catches are big time, are big moments in the game where it hits you right in the hands and then you drop it and it's just like it just lets you all down. You get pretty bummed out about it, even if they don't show it on the field. So, the Chargers, considering the big picture, are miles ahead, in my opinion, of where they should be considering everything. So I don't think they're fraudulent. Honestly, I'm pretty satisfied with where they are. I think they're going to make the playoffs. I'm pretty certain in that. And then once those moments come, I think they're only going to get better from it. It's not like situations before where they just crumble and, they have embarrassing losses or something like that. I like this Chargers team. I love what Jim Harbaugh is doing with them. So, they're going to learn from it and then just move on from this game. But speaking about moving on, we have another game to get to in the AFC South. It was a upset victory by the Tennessee Titans over the Houston Texans that really shook a lot of things up, I think, internally for the Texans. A loss like this, I think, really makes you reflect a lot on the things you have been doing up until this point. And we're going to do a little bit of that, as well as talking about what happened in this wild game, just to go along with the theme of Week 12. So we're going to get to that when we return after our first break.